Welcome to Tech Houblon, the podcast that explores information technology and our passion for beer. I'm your host, Luc du Moulin, and in this episode recorded at Ben's Bar, we dive into the exciting world of information technology, from the latest news and trends to expert opinions. We cover it all, not to mention our beer recommendations. Whether you're a fan of technology, good beer, or a curious listener, there's always something new to learn on each episode. Hello everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Tech and Houblon. Today, we're covering the fascinating world of Devops and explore how to bring it to the IBMI ecosystem. I'm Luc du Moulin, your host, and as always, we're blending IT expertise with a touch of friendly conversation. Typically broadcast from Ben's Bar at R2I, today's discussion spans both sides of the border. For this episode, I'm delighted to welcome Jeff Tickner, CTO for North America and DevOps specialist at ARCAD Software, a trusted partner of R2I. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, Luke.
Thank you for joining us. To kick things off, could you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your role at ARCAD Software?
Oh, sure. I have been doing change management on the IBMI for over 25 years. And I have been involved with source control and DevOps for a long time. I am very well versed with your more traditional change management, but I'm one of the early adopters of DevOps, and I'm a big proponent of automation on IBMI.
Great. Before going any further, let me share some background on the partnership between R2I and ARCAD. In March 2023, I attended a Toronto user group known as TUG conference, where none other than Tim Rowe from IBM was the keynote speaker. His presentation focused on Merlin, a tool designed for modernizing applications on the IBMI platform. The name ARCAD Software featured prominently throughout his talk. With the seal of approval from IBM, it was clear we had to reach out to ARCAD and establish a partnership. And that's exactly what we did. And to get the conversation started, Jeff, could you explain to our listeners what exactly is DevOps?
So DevOps is essentially looking at your workflow. Everybody has some sort of workflow to manage changes, and ideally formalizing it, but also trying to bring consistency and leverage the feedback that you get from your workflow process. And people often assume that DevOps is specifically Git, and so Merlin is using Git. You know, that's a big buzzword now, but it doesn't have to start with Git. You can get to that when you're ready. You know, a lot of people think, I can't do DevOps unless I'm using all of these modern tools, and I have to use Git, and I have to use VS Code, and I'm still a green screen guy. Well, you can do DevOps even using green screen.
Really?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
How does that work?
So the goal is to look at your process and automate. And so what's the classic way to automate on the IBMI? Write CLs. Everybody has, Q startup, the CL that runs when that's DevOps automation. I'm rebooting my system and I need these processes running so I can do my job. And on the dev system, you probably have one or two processes that start up to support your workflow for managing changes. So you already might have some DevOps automation, so to speak. And what we want to do is look at all parts of the workflow and look at what's tedious, what sometimes people don't do because it seems extra work for this little change I'm making or something like that. And if we can automate that, then there's so many ways to do it. If we can automate those tedious steps, we get consistency. And with consistent process, we get more consistent results. And you have fewer surprises.
Okay. I'm new to this. So what I hear from you is that DevOps is not buying tools.
Oh, not at all. I mean, fortunately, a lot of the tools are open source. And so I don't have to necessarily buy anything.
Yeah.
But you don't have to necessarily get started with DevOps by going out and installing a bunch of tools on your IBMI and learning how to use, new scripting languages or whatever.
So from the sounds of it, it's a lot easier, although it's probably a huge task if you want to implement it overall your business. But DevOps is something that can be implemented fairly easily on the IBMI from what I get.
Yeah. And so it's incremental. If we think about the DevOps mindset, the DevOps methodology, they often use the infinity symbol as a symbol, and it's kind of a continuous loop. And part of that is feedback. So the loop represents my change management process, and I'm trying to improve that, make it more consistent. And so the way I can do that is I can insert automation where it's most needed, but I also want to make sure that I'm looking at the feedback. And if I have a problem, it's not uncommon to do a postmortem after a bad Monday. You do an update over the weekend, and then Monday, it's a bad Monday, worse than usual. And so you say, well, where did this come from and how can I avoid it? And often that bad Monday is from an inconsistency in the process. Not always, but it could be that somebody made a small change and said, I don't need to test this. It compiled. What could go wrong? Right? And it does. Or it happens 6 months later. I do a quick fix, and then 6 months later, somebody develops something, some big complex feature, and they don't know about the quick fix because I had to do it at 2:00 in the morning on production. So, one of the great low-hanging fruit about DevOps is formalizing a hotfix. So if I don't make a hotfix directly on production and then try and remember Monday morning to go make it on the dev environment so everybody knows about it, if I make it on dev, but I have a very easy way of putting it into production, and that could be a CL that uses an FTP script to push it over. So I don't have the need to do it directly on production. But again, the real goal here is I'm simplifying it and I'm making sure that the feedback is available, that people are aware of it, and it's not happening in a vacuum. So, and again, that's DevOps. We're trying to formalize the workflow. Everybody has workflow. It can be very informal, which means it's often not consistent. If I can formalize it, then when people complain, what do people complain about when I formalize it? I don't want to do that every time. You're slowing me down. I can't do my job. Okay, so what's the worst part of that formalization? I have to go fill out this spreadsheet and send 4 emails. And okay, so DevOps could be, I fill out that spreadsheet and I write a little VBA script that sends the emails for someone. And so now they have less tedious tasks. They spend more time coding. That's what you pay developers for, is the code. So how can we keep them coding? And you're asking about green screen. So if I am coding and I'm working in SCU and green screen, and I say, oh, and done, it compiles, I want to put it in test. If I can just issue a command on the command line that calls a CL that pushes my change from where I'm working in my programmer library to test, maybe I'm copying it manually right now. And so if I write a CL, that CL just returns every time everybody in the company uses it. And so that's DevOps. That's formalizing. And that CL can be extended then to say, hey, go tell the QA person there's a new change in test, that I might forget to email that QA person. That's a classic example of DevOps. I've automated my process. I provided better feedback. It's consistent. It's easier to use, so people actually want to use it. That's people don't even think about that. Everybody always sees change like, oh, great, we're adopting DevOps. My life is going to be harder now. It's going to be harder to do my job. No, our goal is to make it easier to do your job and get better visibility. And the ultimate tool is Git. You don't have to start with Git, but Git gives you such incredible visibility to code changes. What happened to a line? It's been changed 5 times. In Git, I can see all 5 of those changes. There's no other tool that can do that on the IBMI. Our ARCAD change management doesn't do that. That's why we integrate with Git. So, but again, that's not where you start. You start by looking at your current workflow process and how can I incrementally make it better. And when people see that ROI, then it can be worthwhile to invest in the effort to adopt more and more tools.
So, again, if I understand correctly, from what I hear, DevOps is not, I need to turn the whole shop as an agile shop. I need to implement as a big bang, and I have to purchase or get free tools that I need to implement across my whole process.
Right. And another thing, too, I really push is this is something we've learned at ARCAD, is we try to make our tooling open because we don't want to go into a customer and say, yeah, I see you're using Azure DevOps on your .NET development, but we don't use that. So you're going to have 2 parallel processes. So if the customer, if you as a user, you have a GUI interface that's being managed in a different way than you're managing your IBMI development, and that's often the case nowadays. Lots of people have other platforms that are interacting with the DB2 database. What are they using? And the unfortunate thing is, some people are proactive and they've already gone to those folks that are managing another platform and said, hey, I see you have these cool tools. I want to use them on the IBMI. And the subject matter experts, the SMEs and that side say, well, I can't do that. And it turns out really you can. You can. I won't say it's super easy, but it's not as hard as you think. But, there is some effort involved. So the incremental start, oh, look, I made this simple change. I wrote a CL. I get this return on investment. It's worthwhile pursuing this. And now you think about a common pain point is, we're back to that workflow. We have this GUI interface and we have the native workflow, right? So I make a DB2 change, I expand a field. Obviously, it impacts my GUI interface. So we have a big pizza party on the weekend and everybody's like, oh, I'm putting my stuff in, let me smoke test, and it's this big, you spend your whole weekend, meeting people that you never met before and, eating pizza with them, and it's great. But do you really want to spend your weekend doing that? So if you can get the processes in sync and you can say, hey, we're all going to test together and we're going to test together and not, there's, a week of emails back and forth. Are you in test? Oh, not quite, and so on. And so you can try and get to a synchronous process. And the easiest way to synchronize that is to use the tools that they're using because they already have automation most of the time.
True enough.
If I can leverage that, it's less work for me because I got some guy who already knows the scripting language, and typically it's YML, that is the scripting language on the open system side. So they know that. They know that stuff. I don't have to start from scratch. So use the tools you already have, leverage the expertise you already have, expect for them to say it won't work, and then the magic, the secret sauce there. A couple of years ago, IBM ported a tool to the IBMI called
Ansible.
Thank you. It's holy cow. I had a complete brain fart on that. I'm sorry. Edit that out. Yes. So a couple of years ago, IBM ported a tool to the IBMI called Ansible. And Ansible is an automation tool, but where it is so helpful for this effort is that IBM wrote over 100 tasks. So it's an automation tool. You run a playbook, and the playbook is tasks. And so IBM had the task, stop subsystem. I want to stop the subsystem before I deploy my changes so there's still no locks on the objects. So the IBMI task, stop subsystem, is so smart, it knows if it's already stopped. Whereas if you just issue the command, that returns an error if it's already stopped. You're like, oh, I can't do it. Oh, it actually is stopped. It's smart. Yeah. It's intelligent. And if you say Ansible to an open systems guy, they say, oh, yeah, of course. They're going to talk to Ansible, and Ansible is going to talk to the IBMI. And it's from IBM. So there's no issue about, oh, wait, you have to install Python. It's all Python scripts. IBM provides the Python source, so you can actually extend these tasks out. You can build your own playbooks. But if you say to your open systems guys, I want you to call this Ansible playbook or Ansible task from your process, they're going to say, oh, okay, but what about the IBMI? And you say, it is the IBMI, and they don't believe it, but because it shouldn't be that easy, right? But this is what IBM's doing for us. Merlin is just one of the many things they're doing for us. And, Merlin is a big deal, but it's the big bang, right? It's Git, it's automation, it's everything all at once. It's hard to justify that. But if you can incrementally say, okay, when they deploy their stuff, I want to deploy my stuff, or even better, I want you to deploy my stuff, and when it's successful, then deploy your stuff. That's another classic. Everybody's doing the big pizza party. The open systems guys put their stuff in, and then you go to put your stuff in, and there's a lock. And you're like, oh, it's the backup. Yeah. It's not going to be done for 4 hours. And the open systems guys are like, well, my stuff is in. What do I do now? And like, okay, well, I should be able to put it in. And then the worst case is Monday morning, the website is trying to shove 20 into a 10 long field, right? And wreaking havoc, right? So, and this synchronization is the idea to prevent it. And you say, what's the most likely to have a problem? How can I manage that problem? How can I automate all the checks I want to do? Stopping subsystems, checking for logs. Ansible, they actually have tasks to check if PTFs are installed, and you can actually install PTFs. We actually did an Ansible playbook for a customer to upgrade a whole bunch of systems. It was actually HSBC, Hong Kong Savings Bank. They're a huge IBMI customer, very early adopter of Devops and source control because they have a very complex life, and they have the highest return on investment. But smaller customers, when we were doing HSBC, we were doing a little shop with 5 developers at the same time because everybody can get return on investment. Obviously HSBC, they automate one thing. When we wrote this playbook, Ansible playbook, it went through and updated Java and updated PTFs and updated ARCAD on like 200 LPARs. Wow. Yes. And it was all Ansible, all intelligent. There was a lot of effort to build that playbook. There was very little effort to do the upgrade because we had scripted the whole thing. Yeah, so you can see return on investment.
Yeah, and I guess you got feedback all the way.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, obviously you test these changes, and again, we're back to that feedback there. So the other thing, too, that I run into with my customers is, or just in general, is that the end user doesn't know what happened, right? So they run a deployment. We're back to, did your stuff go in? You can't tell that? No, I can't. I'm on the open system side. How would I know if you updated the IBMI? So if we script that process, even with a CL or whatever you choose to use, if you can push that positive or negative feedback, it worked, it didn't work, up to something common. So that could be, if you're using Ansible, it returns an error message and they say, oh, stop. The IBMI hasn't been updated. Or it could be a task status. So, I run into a lot of customers that are using a project management system of some kind. And the IBMI, I'm keying all that stuff in. So I'm saying, oh yeah, it's in test. Let me go change the status of this task to QA. Let me find the right task. Let me change it to the right status. And in my experience, every time we ask any user to key something in, there's an opportunity for a miskey.
Absolutely. Oh,
and then you could have miscommunication. That could have this huge ripple effect when we're trying to do this. So if I can, extend this out and say, how can I talk to the tool? And so, on the IBMI, modernization nowadays often means web services. So people are getting more familiar with them, and having web services active on the IBMI, really, we're talking about that same thing on the other side. So curl is a tool that can call a URL for us, and I can talk to it directly from RPG. And it's, again, ported to the IBMI. So if I want to go talk to a task system and say, hey, this project is in QA right now, I can use curl even in a CL to say, let's build that string and let's go update the task. And I don't have to key anything in. I don't have to remember that. It's just happening. Again, automation, some tedious thing. Oh, I put it in QA. Now I have to go to 17 different places and tell them it's in QA. I have to send an email. I have to update a task. I have to do this. Okay, let's take away that tedium, and let's avoid, I go to put it in QA and I go to lunch and I come back and, it's in QA. I don't do anything. And it's like 2 days later, well, how come nobody's tested it? Because nobody knows it's in QA, So that's where I see automation. On my side in my life, if I don't automate things and I'm relying on the user to key something in, when they forget, they blame me. They blame my tool and say, oh, ARCAD's busted. So I'm very big on automation. The more that I can take care of for the end user, the smoother my life is. The fewer calls I get on the weekend, like, hey, ARCAD's broken and we can't deploy. So I've just learned automation. And for anybody, any tool set, any workflow, there's always a point, when was the last problem you had? Most of the time it's because somebody didn't know about something, right? A change happened. And so just start from your process and look at where you can formalize and automate.
A few years back, we were talking or thinking of DevOps and saying it's impossible to be done on the IBMI or with the IBMI. Now, I heard about Ansible, tools that are now available, so on. What are the constraints that still exist on the IBMI?
There's very little constraint left because IBM has provided that Ansible tool. Ansible connects with SSH. So SSH is becoming a new communication standard on the IBMI. Again, IBM has formalized this. They shipped it as a PTF. They they have formalized it so it's everybody's more comfortable using it. And SSH is a standard communication. It gives you a command line. So that's how Ansible is doing its thing. And so if we have SSH up and running, which it's secure, then we have a common communication methodology, and it's back to scripting, right? And Ansible is a way to manage that and take advantage of existing scripts. So constraints, people think, I can't install that in the IBMI. Well, maybe you can. I installed Jenkins on the IBMI just because it was terrible. I didn't like it at all. I had to figure out all these problems. I'm like, no, I don't want to install Jenkins on the IBMI. I can have Jenkins anywhere as long as I can talk to the IBMI.
Sure.
And that's the tools that IBM has given me.
There's a last piece I'd like to cover, which we haven't covered yet, is the human impact, all the culture aspect. And as a sub topic would be, can older developers adapt to the DevOps environment?
Yeah, so I do this. I've been doing this for a long time. I've come to call it the curmudgeon factor.
The what?
Curmudgeon factor. So, so I'm an older gentleman myself. So I I say, hey, if I can learn it, you can learn it. But again, even the worst guy in the back of the classroom who's saying, this is stupid, I'm faster in green screen, if they start in green screen, so if you're incrementally improving their life, they're going to be more accepting of those more disruptive changes. One thing I've learned is you can never tell someone a change is not going to be disruptive. It always is. And if you lie to them, or even if you're just very optimistic and you say, oh no, it'll all be great, it'll be better, then when it's not, because it never is better at the beginning, then they're not going to believe you the rest of the time. So again, it's that incremental, let's do our little incremental things. What's the value add for the end user? What's the, we talk about ROI, I put these man hours in, am I saving money? But on the culture side, I put these man hours in, I change something. What's the return for the end user? Look, you don't have to key this stuff in anymore. You don't have to go here and here and here because I'm doing it on the back end. I just need you to do this one thing, that's different. But here's the value to you. I've learned to constantly emphasize what the value is to the developer as opposed to trying to impose, this is your new process, suck it up, that's your life. But instead, this is the new process. Here are the benefits. And again, start with the tedious tasks that people don't always do, automate them, and they will accept your next change more readily. And so you're adapting to that culture. I'll tell you, going to Git is a big culture shift. That's why I save it for last, because that's where that curmudgeon factor really kicks in. People really don't like, some people, I should say, really don't like Git and have trouble seeing the value. But again, there's lots of incremental, smaller changes that can show the value of where you're going.
Well, that's very, very impressive to hear that all of this is available to us. It's not magic, but almost. But the biggest part is there's partners in the IBMI world that can help you implement DevOps, and you don't have to bing bang it. You can do it slowly, piecemeal, project at a time. And frankly speaking, to me, it makes DevOps more appealing than ever.
Yes, absolutely.
Jeff, it's been a great session. We got a wealth of excellent information, and I felt all along how passionate you are on the topic. I hope our audience sees the possibility of implementing DevOps in their own environment. Until next time, stay safe, and if you have questions, don't hesitate. We're around to help you. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, everybody.